My wife lied about being pregnant, while I worked 2 jobs to pay her debts. So I walked away and took everything she owned. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and I thought hard work could fix everything. I've never been the type to shy away from responsibility. Between my day job at the accounting firm and my evening shift delivering packages, I barely had a moment to breathe. But I told myself it was all worth it. Every late night, every skipped meal, every ache in my back from lugging boxes was part of building a life I could be proud of. A life I could share with Ava. Ava was, well, she was everything I thought I wanted. She had this effortless charm that drew people in, and the way she smiled at me after a long day made all the exhaustion fade. She was affectionate, playful, and, most importantly, she seemed genuinely grateful for everything I did. When she leaned against me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But there were little hints, tiny flashes, that suggested she had a taste for things beyond our modest lifestyle. A casual comment about a new dress, a wistful sigh at a designer bag in a store window. Nothing that screamed warning, but enough to plant a quiet seed in the back of my mind. Our routine was simple. I'd cover the rent, the groceries, the bills, while Ava worked part-time at the boutique downtown. She contributed what she could, but I never minded. I told myself this was just temporary, that as long as we were building a future together, sacrifices were part of the package. One evening, as we were folding laundry, she casually mentioned her old debts from college, and a few credit cards. "I've got some stuff I never told you about. Nothing huge, just a couple of bills piling up," she said, shrugging. I didn't hesitate. "It's fine. I can handle it. We'll figure it out together." I meant it. I really did. I felt proud of being able to provide, proud of being the partner who could take care of the heavy stuff without complaint. I thought loyalty, honesty, and hard work were all that mattered in a marriage. But as I looked at her smile that night, I didn't realize that pride was about to become my blind spot, and that the life I was sacrificing everything for might not be real at all. The quiet hum of the city outside our apartment window felt like a lullaby, but I couldn't shake the faint unease settling in my chest. I could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing into my bones more each day. Working 2 jobs wasn't just tiring. It was starting to feel like a trap I couldn't escape. I'd come home after a 12-hour shift, my back aching, hands still sore from lifting packages, and Ava would greet me with a smile that somehow felt both comforting and just out of reach. Most nights, we'd sit at the small kitchen table, and she'd chat about her day at the boutique, the occasional gossip from customers, or her latest idea for redecorating the apartment. I'd listen, nod, try to muster a smile, all while thinking about the pile of bills waiting for me on the counter. It started with little things. A text left unanswered for hours, an unusually long phone call she'd quickly dismiss when I asked. One night, I noticed the receipts from the grocery store didn't match the bills she told me she'd paid. "Did you put that on the credit card?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, but the unease in my chest made it hard. "Oh, no, I thought you were handling it," she said, a little too quickly, a little too casually. I shrugged it off, convincing myself I was overreacting. I was the one working every hour of the day. My fatigue must be coloring everything. Still, there was that flicker of doubt that I couldn't quite shake. As the weeks went on, the financial pressure compounded. I picked up extra shifts at the accounting firm, working through weekends, sometimes taking calls late into the night. My body ached constantly, but the thought of Ava and the life we were supposedly building kept me moving. I told myself it was temporary, that the sacrifices would pay off once her debts were cleared and our future was secure. Then came the first real argument. She was frustrated because she'd spent more than she planned at the boutique, and I felt my patience snap. "You know I'm working myself to the bone, right? I can't cover everything," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "I know. I don't want to worry you," she replied softly, looking down at her hands. Her voice should have calmed me, but instead it left a sour taste in my mouth. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that her gratitude didn't quite match the sacrifices I was making. And as I lay in bed that night, the hum of the city outside mixing with the soft ticking of our old clock, I felt the first real tug of doubt. I was giving everything, and yet I couldn't tell if it was ever enough. Little did I know, that doubt was about to become a storm I couldn't escape. I'll never forget the day Ava told me she was pregnant. I was folding laundry in our cramped bedroom when she slipped into the room, her hands covering her mouth, eyes wide, practically glowing with excitement. I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. For a moment, the exhaustion, the aches in my back, the late nights, all of it disappeared. I froze, just staring at her, the words sinking in slowly. My chest tightened, a strange combination of joy and relief washing over me. Finally, I thought, all the sacrifices, all the work. It wasn't just for bills or debt anymore. This was for a family. We hugged, a long, clinging embrace that made my head spin with possibilities. I imagined holding our child for the first time, seeing Ava smile as we decorated a nursery, the warmth of a small family wrapped around me like sunlight. For the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like the universe was rewarding my efforts. And yet, even in that moment, there were small things that didn't quite fit. She was hesitant about doctor appointments, claiming she was too busy or tired to schedule them. She avoided certain questions about tests or timelines, brushing them off with a nervous laugh. "Don't worry about it yet," she'd say, pressing her hand against my chest. "Everything's fine." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that this child, and this marriage, was as real as I'd imagined. So I worked harder, more hours, skipped more sleep. My body ached, my eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets and addresses. But I felt motivated, driven by something bigger than bills or debt. Something alive, growing inside her, growing inside us. I started thinking about the future in ways I hadn't before. The money I was earning, the sacrifices I was making, they finally had a purpose beyond just keeping the lights on. Every night, after dropping packages at the last doorstep, I'd come home and sit quietly, imagining Ava resting, imagining a tiny life taking shape, imagining the moment I'd tell her, "We made it through everything, together." But shadows lingered. Her avoidance, her anxious little quirks, they gnawed at the back of my mind. And as I drifted to sleep that night, exhausted but euphoric, a subtle unease crawled up my spine. Something about this joy felt fragile, like it could shatter with the slightest touch. And deep down, I didn't yet know how fragile it really was. By the time a few weeks had passed, the exhaustion had begun to weigh on me like a lead blanket. I was running on fumes, barely able to keep my eyes open during the day. Yet I still forced myself to push through every shift. I told myself it was temporary, that this was all part of building a life for Ava and our baby. But some nights, when I sat alone on the couch, my hands trembling slightly as I counted bills or stared at the dwindling savings, a creeping anxiety began to settle in. Ava seemed different, not in a way I could easily name, but in a way I felt in my chest. A subtle tension in her smile, a flicker of defensiveness when I asked about doctor visits or the bills. One evening, as I was folding the laundry she'd left sprawled across the bedroom floor, I noticed a stack of receipts that didn't match up with anything she'd told me she had spent. "Hey, what's this?" I asked, holding up a receipt for a boutique purchase that hadn't been mentioned. "Oh, I just thought it would be fine," she said quickly, glancing away. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But the pattern was starting to form. The little evasions, the quick excuses, the way she'd sometimes hide her phone when I entered the room. It all added up, gnawing at the part of me that believed in honesty and loyalty. Still, I doubled down on my work. Extra shifts at the accounting firm. Longer nights delivering packages. Meals skipped, showers rushed. Anything to keep everything afloat. I convinced myself it was for the baby, for our future. Every time I came home, exhausted beyond words, I'd see Ava waiting with that same smile, that same warmth, and I'd allow myself to breathe a little easier. Then came the night that broke something in me. Ava had been unusually quiet, scrolling on her phone while I tried to eat a hastily prepared dinner. "You're tired," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "I am," I admitted, voice hoarse. "But it's worth it. For you. For us." She squeezed my hand, her eyes soft, but in that moment, I realized how alone I really felt. I was sacrificing everything, giving every ounce of energy and care, and I couldn't tell if she even noticed. That quiet realization of being used, of giving so much, and wondering if it was ever enough, settled in my chest like ice. And as I lay in bed that night, the city hum outside mixing with my restless thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong, something I wasn't prepared for. It started with a little inconsistency, almost too small to notice at first. Ava had been talking about setting up a doctor's appointment for weeks, but each time I brought it up, she had some excuse. Too busy, too tired, or "We'll do it next week." I tried to brush it off, telling myself that early appointments could be flexible, that maybe she was just nervous. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it wouldn't go away. Then one evening, I went to grab a folder from the shelf and noticed something that made my stomach sink. Among the scattered papers was a receipt from a medical lab, but it wasn't dated recently. It was months old, and it wasn't from the clinic she told me she was going to. My hands went cold. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was for a different test. Maybe it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew something was off. Later that night, after we had finished dinner, I confronted her gently, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, the appointment. When are you going? I just want to make sure everything's okay." Ava looked at me with wide eyes, blinking rapidly. I thought I told you. I'll go next week. I'm just stressed, okay?" I could feel the tension building in my chest, a mix of worry and something else I couldn't quite name. Her explanation didn't sit right. The way she avoided my gaze, the slight quiver in her voice. It was all too familiar now. My mind raced, replaying every small detail I had dismissed before. The evasions, the quick excuses, the little half-truths. Over the next few days, I started noticing more. Small charges on her credit card, messages that seemed hidden, her phone screen lighting up only when she thought I wasn't looking. It all added up to something I wasn't ready to confront yet. But the gut-wrenching suspicion took root. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The woman I loved, the life I thought we were building, the future I had been sacrificing for. It all felt like it could crumble with one word, one revelation. And the worst part? I had no idea just how deep the deception went. I drifted into a restless sleep, the city hum outside our window sounding less comforting than it ever had before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change forever. It hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. Halfway through the week, I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop, and my heart pound so violently I thought it might stop. Ava's phone had been left unlocked on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower, and curiosity and a creeping sense of dread got the better of me. I didn't want to look. I wanted to trust. But a part of me knew I had to. The messages were there, clear as day. Conversations with the financial advisor, plans about her debts, and, most shocking of all, messages with a friend where she casually mentioned she wasn't actually pregnant, not even close. Every little thing she'd said, every tearful smile, every story about doctor visits, it had all been a lie. I couldn't breathe. I dropped the phone onto the counter, my hands trembling, my mind spinning. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming softly, I forced myself to speak. "Ava, we need to talk." My voice was tight, brittle, betraying the anger I felt bubbling under the surface. She froze, eyes wide, the hum dying on her lips. "Talk about what?" she asked, a slight tremor in her tone that made my chest twist. I could barely get the words out. The pregnancy. It's not real, is it?" Her silence was deafening. Then she tried to laugh it off, a nervous, high-pitched sound that did nothing to mask the truth. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. All the sacrifices, the late nights, the 2 jobs, the hours spent covering her bills. It had been for nothing. Every ounce of trust I had given her had been used to manipulate me. Anger, hurt, and betrayal collided in my chest, leaving me dizzy, numb, and trembling. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something. But instead, I just sat there, staring at her, the apartment suddenly suffocating me with its quiet hum. The weight of the truth was unbearable, and I realized this wasn't just a lie about a pregnancy. It was a lie about everything we'd built, everything I had sacrificed, everything I thought I knew about her. And in that moment, I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could crumble here, or I could find a way to take back control. But I had no idea how deep the storm would go before I found my footing. I hit a point I never thought I would, the kind of low that sinks into your bones and makes even breathing feel like a burden. I was physically exhausted from working 2 jobs, emotionally shattered from Ava's betrayal, and mentally spinning from the realization that the life I thought we were building together had been nothing but a facade. I couldn't sleep. Every time my eyes closed, I saw her smiling face, the warmth I had trusted, now twisted into deception. My chest felt tight, my stomach churned, and I couldn't stop replaying every sacrifice I'd made, every dollar, every late night, every skipped meal, and how she had used it all. For the first time, I felt completely alone. I tried calling a friend, anyone, but words wouldn't come out right. I didn't want pity. I wanted answers, closure, someone to tell me that I wasn't insane for trusting her. Ava, meanwhile, was normal. She went about her day as if nothing had happened, laughing at little things, texting friends, moving through the apartment with a casual grace that made my anger boil and my despair deepen. One night, after a double shift delivering packages in the rain, I came home and found her sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone. The lights were dim, the hum of the city outside barely audible through the closed windows. I collapsed beside her, soaked, shivering, and she looked at me with that same smile, the one that had once made me feel safe. "You okay?" she asked softly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything I'd discovered, to confront her and break her in the way she had broken me. But instead, all I could manage was a hollow, "Yeah, just tired." That night, lying awake on the worn mattress, the cold apartment pressing against my back, I felt something crack inside me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a total erasure of trust, of love, of everything I had poured myself into. And yet, somewhere beneath the fatigue and the heartbreak, a small ember of determination flickered. I wasn't going to let her win, not completely. But first, I had to gather myself, to understand the full extent of the deceit, and to plan my next move. I had no idea how much it would take to claw back control, and the storm that was coming for both of us was far worse than anything I had endured up to this point. I started paying closer attention, noticing things I had brushed off before. The little inconsistencies, the sudden quiet moments when I walked into a room, the way she hid her phone just a fraction too quickly. Every detail, every tiny deception began to form a pattern. I realized that I couldn't keep living in this haze of doubt and exhaustion. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to reclaim my life, I needed a plan. Over the next few days, I quietly began documenting everything. Bills she claimed she'd paid, receipts that didn't match, her excuses, her texts, her lies. Every screenshot, every note, every contradiction became a piece of evidence. I felt a cold clarity for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was financial manipulation, a calculated effort to extract from me as much as possible under the guise of love and responsibility. One evening, I confronted her, not angrily, not yet, but with a calm I didn't know I had. "Ava, I need to know the truth. About the pregnancy, about the debts, everything," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. She froze, her fingers tightening around her coffee mug. I didn't mean to. I just..." Her voice faltered, her composure slipping. I realized in that moment how much power I still had. I had been blind, exhausted, manipulated, but now I saw clearly. Every lie, every manipulation, every borrowed dollar, every late-night sacrifice had left a trail I could follow. I could expose the truth without her being able to spin it. The apartment, usually warm and familiar, felt different that night. The light seemed sharper, the silence heavier. For the first time in weeks, I felt a pulse of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. The ember that had flickered at my lowest point was now a steady flame. And yet, even as I sat there, mentally mapping my next steps, I knew confronting her was only the beginning. There was a storm coming, one that would change everything. How far would I go? How much would it cost her and me before the scales were balanced? I didn't know yet, but I was ready to find out. The confrontation finally came, and it was nothing like I expected. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I simply laid out everything I had found, the receipts, the credit card statements, the hidden debts, and the truth about the pregnancy. I watched her face as I spoke, every flicker of color draining from her cheeks, every nervous glance betraying the calm she tried to maintain. "I know everything, Ava," I said, my voice steady but low, almost cold. "I know the pregnancy wasn't real. I know about the debts you lied about. I know how you've been using me." She froze completely, staring at me like she'd never seen me like this before. I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "No," I interrupted softly but firmly. "There's nothing to explain. This isn't about excuses anymore. This is about accountability." The room was heavy with silence. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. It was a quiet storm, but it felt massive. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the exhausted, manipulated partner anymore. I was the one in control. I started taking steps to reclaim what had been mine all along. I changed passwords, transferred accounts, documented everything legally. Every dollar she had hidden, every piece of property she claimed was hers, was now on my radar. She tried to bargain, tried to guilt me, tried to appeal to the love we had shared. But I was unyielding. And as she sat there, watching me move decisively, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. Sadness for the life we could have had, but liberation in knowing I wouldn't be a victim any longer. Yet even as the pieces began to fall into place, I knew the real challenge wasn't over. Ava's reaction would escalate, and I had to be prepared for the consequences of exposing the full truth. The battle wasn't done. The storm wasn't over. And as I stood in the apartment, listening to her whispered pleas, I realized that reclaiming control was only the beginning. Once I had the upper hand, I started taking control of everything that had been manipulated behind my back. Bills that had been paid late, or not at all, were now settled under my supervision. Her access to shared accounts was revoked, and I meticulously documented every debt and asset she claimed. The sense of empowerment that came from finally having clarity and control was intoxicating. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Ava tried to protest, trying to spin stories, pleading, even crying. "Please, you don't understand. I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said one night, desperation leaking into every syllable. I didn't flinch. I had listened to enough excuses, witnessed enough manipulation. I responded calmly, almost coldly. "I understand perfectly. That's why things are changing. This ends now." Every day after that felt like reclaiming pieces of my life. I could finally sleep without the knot of worry in my chest. I started organizing the apartment, making it feel like mine again, not just a space filled with lies and deceit. Every little victory, each corrected bill, each documented transaction, was proof that I was taking back what had been stolen from me. The sense of poetic justice started to sink in as well. She could no longer hide luxuries she had purchased on my trust. Every lie, every manipulation, every financial abuse was now visible, accountable, and powerless. I felt the scales of our relationship tip firmly back in my favor, not with malice, but with the cold satisfaction of someone who had been wronged and refused to stay down. And yet, even with this newfound power, I knew the emotional battle wasn't over. Ava's pleas and attempts to manipulate still lingered, the tension thick in the apartment air. The real test was not just in reclaiming what was mine, but in holding my ground, in refusing to be drawn back into her web of deceit. I was no longer the exhausted, overworked partner. This was my life, and I was finally steering the course. But the final confrontation, the one that would seal everything, was still ahead. And as I looked at her sitting quietly across from me, I could feel the storm building toward its climax. The final confrontation was nothing like I expected, and yet it felt inevitable. Ava had begun to realize that I wasn't backing down, that every attempt at manipulation, every plea, every tearful excuse was meaningless against the truth I now held. I had prepared myself mentally for this moment, but nothing could fully brace me for the intensity of seeing her finally stripped of the comfort and control she had wielded for so long. "I want you to understand something," I began, my voice steady, cutting through the tension that filled the apartment. "Everything you lied about, every debt you hid, every moment you manipulated me, I've documented it all. The pregnancy, the spending, the excuses. It's all on record. I will not allow you to take advantage of me ever again." Her face went pale, eyes wide as panic flickered across her features. "Please, don't ruin everything," she whispered, voice trembling, desperate. I didn't mean to." I held up my hand to stop her, my mind calm, but my heart still pounding. "No, I'm not here to argue or to forgive. You had your chance. This is the consequence of your actions." The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the city outside and the faint ticking of the clock. I could see the shock in her eyes, the realization that her control had completely evaporated. I felt a mixture of vindication and sorrow, a strange combination that made my chest ache but also gave me clarity. Then came the final twist. A few days later, I discovered that some of the people she had confided in had already learned the truth. Word of her lies and manipulations had begun to spread through her social circle. The irony hit me hard. She had tried to manipulate me and the world, and now the world was witnessing the reality of her deception. I sat back, watching the ripple effect of accountability unfold. Justice wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about truth, about reclaiming my dignity and refusing to be a victim. I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a calm, hard-earned sense of empowerment. But even as the tension faded, I knew the final chapter, my own healing, was still ahead, a quiet victory that no one else could take away. Sitting alone in the apartment a week later, I finally felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The chaos, the manipulation, the lies, they were behind me, The debts were settled, the accounts were under my control, and Ava's attempts to guilt or sway me had lost all power. I could finally breathe, knowing that I had reclaimed not just my finances, but my life and my dignity. I spent that first quiet evening reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also forced me to recognize my own strength. Every sacrifice, every long night, every moment I had questioned myself, it had all led to this clarity. I realized that the person I needed to protect most was myself, and that loyalty and love only worked when they were mutual. The apartment, once filled with tension and subtle deceit, now felt like a sanctuary. I could hear the soft hum of the city outside, the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze, and for the first time, it felt comforting rather than oppressive. I made small changes, reorganized my space, and allowed myself to enjoy the simple things. A cup of tea in the morning, sunlight streaming through the window, quiet evenings with a book in hand. I knew I had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The experience had been brutal, but it had also been transformative. I could finally envision a future where I was in control, where I could trust cautiously but fiercely, and where I would never again allow someone else's deception to define my life. And though the scars of betrayal would remain, they were no longer chains. They were reminders of my strength, my perseverance, and my capacity to rise from the lowest points. I felt empowered, liberated, and more aware than ever of what I deserved. As I closed the window and listened to the city settle into the night, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Life was mine again, and this time, I was never letting it slip away. The past was a lesson, the present was freedom, and the future, well, that was finally mine to write. The hum of the apartment felt alive, comforting, and I knew, deep down, that I had truly reclaimed everything she had tried to take from me.